Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the show again. As you've been aware, we've been having a few technical issues with sound, so hopefully everything is going to be okay today. We are aware that the issues are popping up, and we're trying to fix them, and so you'll just have to bear with us. If the sound is a little bit odd, please turn your sound down on your device, and hopefully we'll get through okay. But like I say, we're trying to fix it. We're not quite sure what it is. We've got a couple of techos on it, and it's just one of those things. So, like I say, bear with us, and we'll get things done. So, just welcome to everybody, and hopefully we'll get through a nice show. Now, where we got up to the last show we did was we built the tray frame. Now, one of the things that I did was I got all of the parts. Let me put this together for you. I just went and sanded all the inside of it, and I think I might have sanded off my marks. Oh no, I didn't. So I've got basically the frame made. This was the last thing we did last show, and I cut the frame, and I cut the feet in it, so that we could get a nice sort of set on the bench. So what do we need to do? The thing about the thing that I went through last week was all about the order in which to do things, and it's quite important that you sort of follow a particular order, because there are things that you can do on a square box when the whole box is assembled that you can't do here. And so what we need to do is make sure we get the order right. So follow along with me, and we'll get it done. So one of the things that I do on my smaller boxes is I round over the inside edge between my feet, and what that does, it just helps that shadow appear. It also gives you a little bit more space there when you actually haven't cut any material out, and you can't do that on this because it's tapered, and so the edges are splayed out, and so therefore what we have to do is, before we actually assemble it, we've got to cut that little bit there. Now, using our round over bit, we're going to be using that quite a bit before we actually get to assemble the box. So my 204, so I'm using a small round bit, and the reason I'm using the small round over bit is because we've got very thin timber. I don't want to cut a big curve on a little thin piece of timber. So that's the first thing we're going to do today. Once I've got that done, I'm going to then fit the base in it, which is the next step after this one. And then after that, it's all about making the cutouts for your finger holes.
So Cole, just remind us what the angle of this tray is.
Oh, this one's a 5-degree angle.
Yeah.
So even at 5 degrees, you've still got a fair angle on the back of that. Now, this is the other point that I made last week, was to get it to sit flat. You can see that it actually sits at a 5-degree angle. Now, I'm not holding it at there. Well, actually I am holding it, but that's the angle that it's going to sit at. This has to be flush or parallel to the top of the table. So you need to chamfer off the top of that and the bottom of that before you actually cut out your rebate there. So that was another step that we had to take into consideration. So what I'm doing here is I'm just adjusting my route a bit so that it just goes underneath. And ears on, folks. We'll start cutting pretty much straight away today. I think I'm turned on everywhere. Okay, so when I'm using this left to right, come in so that the router bit sits in the crook of the cutout you've made there. Okay, so that's that task done. We don't need to do that afterwards. And it looks quite nice. Once you put it together, you can see that it looks just that little bit softer as it curls down under the bench, or onto the bench, I should say. So that looks quite nice. Now, I already had a piece of material cut out for the base. If I get time later, I want to talk about different timbers that we've got and why we're using them. But that little piece of material is going to go into there. Now, unfortunately, it won't go at the moment because I haven't rounded over the corners. But you need to cut yourself a piece of material there. Now, I've had a few people who've suggested ways of actually making sure that measurement is correct. Now, the general consensus by a number of people, and myself included, is assemble the box and then make yourself a message stick. Now, your message stick, this is just some offcuts of 4mm. If you place one in here, there's a thin piece, place another one in there, this is difficult to measure because of the angle. So the more acute the angle, you're going to find it really difficult to actually get an accurate size. So your little message stick is like this. And this is all I've done. This is the way I did it originally. Okay, so that's my distance from there to there, and that's my piece of material, that's the length of my piece of material. So all I need to do is shorten it a tiny little bit, and I'll have a little space there for it to actually expand and contract. So basically all I do, that's all I've done, and to do the same is just a matter of getting some shorter bits and making your message stick go across this way. And that will give you your width, of course, of your piece of timber. So very simple, pretty easy. Don't have any fancy bits of gear. Somebody suggested internal calipers. Well, that could work too, but they need to open them up really wide. But anyway, a message stick like that was adequate for what we wanted to do. So anyway, that's what I've done, and I've cut and sanded my piece of material ready to go. It's just a matter of go over to the drum sander now, and or the disc sander, and I'm going to just round over the corners. For those of you who don't have the radius jig, we do have them for sale. They're not that expensive. Just get onto us and we can get you a radius jig, whatever colour you like. I like the green ones because it's a Gifkins green. And then we just work through fitting our piece of timber. Now, if it's too long, of course, nip a bit off. If it's too short, well, then you have to probably make a new one. But if it's generally, I make them a tiny little bit longer, and that gives me my tray base that fits in quite nicely. If that's all you want to do to the tray, by all means, that's all you have to do. Now, that's what I would have done when I built these trays that don't have handles on them. They're just little flat trays. That's the process I've gone through to get these. But we're going to put handles on these ones. And we've got two different types of handles. We've got this one here, and we've got this one here. Now, there's a trick to these, so the idea is to follow along. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build this tray here. Okay, so I'm going to do that handle there. And the reason being is because when you put your hand in there, it sort of fits quite nicely and under the tray. It's quite small. It's big enough for somebody who has big hands, and it's small enough for somebody who has small hands to have a comfortable grip of the tray. Not that you always need that. You could always lift it up from underneath, but it looks nice with a tray with a handle in it. Okay, so our handle. We deliberately made these 75 mil. These are 50 millimeters wide, and these are 75 millimeters wide. Now, here's the process that I went through. I've measured down my 25 mil, and then I've built myself a little plastic template. Now, these take a little while to cut out. This is just a piece of 4 mil or 6 mil perspex. I have a centre line on it there. I have a 25 millimeter mark that goes all the way along here, and I have a mark that runs here, and here is the centre of a hole that I would drill here and here, so that I can cut all this excess out of here. So when I set it up, I find the centre of my piece of timber. Now there's a step before this, and that is to tape the two pieces together. So you do them both at the same time. Now if you've done all your work's been accurate, you will find that they should fit together perfectly. Now I'm using painter's tape. It's really thin, and the technique that I use here is I'm going to tape the end of it like so. And then wrap the two bits around. Make sure they're perfectly aligned. Be very fussy about how you do this to get it right. Now what I've got there is I've got a perfectly flat surface. What I want is perfectly flat on the other end, because if I put that down, it's going to be tilted like that because of the thickness of the tape. So I need to do the same on the other end to make sure it's even. Not too concerned about the top side. Okay, so that's perfectly lined up. There's no spacing around here or steps or anything like that, and I've got perfectly flat surface on both top and bottom. Now, find your centre between the two. This is my ruler, and because I had it at 200, I know my centre is going to be 100. Ooh, lost my little. Be accurate with this. Square a line across. Now I can use the LARK tool to do that, no problem. Okay, so now I have now I have my centre line, and I have my 25 millimeter mark, and what I'm doing now is I line up my centre mark from here and my 25 millimeter mark from there, and then I'm just going to draw my shape in here. Now I want to put a mark here and a mark here, and now have a shape there. And that gives me my handles. Okay, so that's where my handle's going to be. Now, it takes a little bit to work out where that's got to be, so you may have to do a little bit of experimenting. You may need to do 3 or 4 sets and try and get it to shape. It's really hard to see, particularly on this timber. So over to my drill. Find my centre. Now that's a 16mm drill that I have there. The hole itself is 19mm. So I'm just making sure I've got it in the centre. Clamp this down. Make sure it's nice and tight. You do not want this to move in the process of doing this. Just checking. Okay. The other thing that you need to do is to make sure that the platform that you've actually put your piece of timber on is perfectly flat. You do not want tear out happening around this side of the hole. Just going to shift that a little bit. Just got to make sure I get that inside the lines. Got that. Oh, that moved. I'm usually fairly fussy about this bit. Okay, so I have a hole at each end. What I'm going to do now is I need to cut this bit out of here. So over to the vise. Pamela's going to do a little dance around here. And all I'm going to use is a jigsaw. Now if you've got another tool that will actually do this job for you, by all means use it. I find a jigsaw is adequate for this task. And how long is it since you've seen an old Mattek? A really old jigsaw. section. Okay, you can see I'm inside the line, so now I need to run a bit around, back over to the table. Yes. It is a little bit of a dance around some of the gear that we've got here, but anyway.
Oh, what do they call that? Woodworker's waltz.
Woodworker's waltz, well that's a good one, I haven't heard that one before. Okay.
You can have that one.
Oh, thank you. Now, this is where the fun begins. My little plastic template now gets double-sided taped to the top of there. I put this on a couple of days ago, so I was hoping it'd stay there. And make sure you line everything up exactly how you had it when you drew your lines there. Got it. Okay, so now that's stuck on there. It's exactly how it needs to be. Now the router bit that I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a flush trim router bit. There's a number of different ones that you can use. I've got one here. This one's a little bit too small for this task. You can see it's got a bearing on the top and the bottom. It probably would work here, but there's not enough room for it to actually run on bits and pieces. So I'm going to use a spiral version. This one here. A little bit bigger, a little bit heavier, a little bit more stable. That's, for those of you who want to buy one, that's what that one is, a TSRW something.
View of the tip.
Yep. And so I fit that in. Make sure I do it up. Drop it down a bit. And what I want is I want the bottom bearing to run on my template. So when I'm adjusting my height, I don't want the cutter to actually touch my template. You pretty much got it there. Now, this has a tendency to grab, so you've got to go very, very slowly with this and very, very carefully. It's not something you can just bash in and have a go at. You've got to remember that you need to cut in the direction against the rotation of the router bit. So I've got to pull my piece this way around here to get it to cut properly, because the router bit's going to be spinning in this direction. So I need to have a very good grip on it and take it very, very steady. Just take small bits off, little bites. Okay, now it may have looked a very simple operation, but believe me, you need to have a good hold on the piece of material, and you need to be very careful about just taking little bites at a time. If you try and take a whole lot at once, it's going to start ripping it out of your fingers, and then all sorts of things can happen. So be very, very careful about how you go about when you're doing something like that. When you look at it, I've got quite a thick piece of timber with the two pieces actually joined together. So now it's just a matter of rounding over parts of it. Now I might leave that tape on there because I may need to use that again. So now I have my two handles. So the next task now, what we can't do is we can't round over that while it's assembled, so we have to round that over first. So back to our round over bit. I'm going to use the 204 on the outside. The 504 I should say, 504. I'm going to use a 502 on the inside because we don't need to take a whole lot of material off. Now I could leave it until after I've done all the bits and pieces, but I don't want to do that. I want to do it while I've got it in a small piece like this, easier to manage. Should be pretty right. So it is on. So all we needed to do was round over those and just soften the edges a little bit so that when you put your fingers in here you don't grab them, or it doesn't scratch your fingers or anything. So I could probably take that up a little bit more. It's not quite enough. I see it slipped when I locked it up. I'll take a bit more off it. So here's on. Now the inside, swirl around a bit. So the 204, as you can see, it's very, very small. That's what it looks like. There are lots of steps involved in building these handles, and I've done a lot of experimenting with it and found you can get away with a lot of stuff, but if you want the quality of the work to stay at a high level, just take the effort to do some of the smaller stuff nicely. Okay, so that should do the inside. That should be fine. Here's on. So all I've done there is basically just taken the sharp edge off the inside when you put your fingers through. So it's quite nice, and it keeps that visual effect of the flat surface on the inside of the panel as well. So that was an important factor as well. Okay, so next step. Now what we need to do is we need to shape this, whatever shape we're going to. So we're going to do this shape here. So what I have is if you've looked at a lot of my other work, you'll see that I've got lots of these little jigs around, and it's just a matter of sitting my piece of material in here, clamping it down, and then using a router bit to shape the outside of that. But before I do that, what I want to do is I want to show you some of the different things that I've done with this jig that I didn't do with the jigs in the past. So I've got one here, I've got the parts made. This shape here is this shape here, right? So that's that shape there. You'll notice that my shape, I've used exactly the same template, but I've turned it upside down. So that fits there. You can see my centre line lines up here, this lines up with my 25mm mark, and so that's all I've done, and then I've created this little shape here. Alright, it's just a matter of cutting it out with your jigsaw, cutting it out on your bandsaw, and filing and shaping it to whatever shape you like. What I've tried to do is I've tried to copy the rounding over of this and then just fade off gently off into that part there. So that's what I've done with it. But when I put this together, one of the problems you have is that your piece of timber is not square. So you may not get it right. So what we have to do is we have to shape the end of this to whatever angle you have on there. Alright, so this one here is a 5 degree. I've already got one made. This is it here in the 5 degree, and you can see that this is at 5 degrees. So what I want is I need a 10 degree one. So let's go over to the drop saw and I'll show you what I do with this. So remember we made these little templates for the drop saw. This is my 10 degree one. Just clamp that in place, my piece of timber, and just dock the end of it at 10 degrees. I'll bring this over here. And here's my 10 degree. I just need one of my bits of timber. Let's say I'll use this one. I'll use this one for the measure up. So this is my centre mark. So what I want is I want my piece of timber to be over the centre mark. And then this one comes up here. And what I need to do is I need to angle that over so that it's square. Try square. Got my centre mark. That's my centre mark, and that will fit into there, and that will make me a 10-degree one. So, you stay there, just got to remember how I made these in the past. It was just a nail gun. Just check that square. That's perfect. Ears on. And this has to sit up a little bit. And then it's just a matter of fitting a clamp onto that. So that's how they are made. Quite easy, quite simple. And I have one here that I am using, which is this shape. That's this shape. So that's what I would be doing to make one of these, this one over here. So that's at 5 degrees. Change me around a bit. So that process of actually building one of those clamps, if you do lots of them, you get used to doing it. It's a very simple process, and you can keep them for a long time, and they will serve you well. Now, the router bit that I'm using here is my straight cutter from my A10 kit. I want the bearing to run on the piece of timber, so that'll run on there. And I want the top of it just above the piece. So ears on everybody, and I'll just trim up this and make it look nice. Now you'll notice when I'm cutting this, what I did is I started from the outside edge and I started taking it off a little bit at a time. If you try and take all that at once, it'll end up, because the grain runs this way, you're going to peel that piece off and you get a big tear out section there, and it's going to look fairly ordinary. So there's still a little bit of work to do. I've got to round over the top edges, and but basically that's my shape. So the second one. You just need not to be in such a hurry. It caught onto the end of the round a bit. So now I've got two handles. Well, all I need to do now is round them over, right? And before I do that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you what the other one looks like. I have a box here where I've got a different shape. You can see the two different shapes. And I've done one end. What I need to do is the other end. So I'll just pull this apart. Swap jigs. And so that gives me a second shape. Okay, so the two shapes, and you can choose whichever one you like. It's makes nice handles. Okay, next step. Round over the outside of the top. So that goes round over from outside to outside. And when we do the inside, we only do from the center of our curve to the center of the curve. That way we keep a square shoulder on here, so that it matches up to the side panel when it comes through. So 504 for the outside. I think we might get finished on time today, Pamela.
That'd be nice.
I hope the sound's been good for folks. Have been any comments on the sound?
No, a couple in the beginning, but
Okay. Okay, so just setting 504. Now be careful you don't round over off the end. When we start this, make sure that the end of your piece of timber is lined up with the centre of the router bit. If you start halfway out here, you're going to round over this edge here, which we don't want to do. We just want to round over from there to there. And when you get to this end here, you come to the centre and then you just pull it off so that it doesn't round itself around a router bit. So swap to the smaller router bit. Now with this one, I'm only going to go from the inside of there to the inside of there. And the reason for that is all I want to do is take that sharp edge off across the top there. That's all I'm going to be doing. Don't need to have a rounded over section in here. If you do, you're going to round over into where the other piece will sit. So let's just do the little one first. Something's happening there. So all I've done there is I've just taken the sharpness off the end of that, but it's kept a nice round, even I could sanded it if you like, but I found using the router bit gives you a nice even surface all the way around. So now it's time to glue the whole thing together. Now, this one will get glued together. I'm not going to glue them together on the show because it's a pretty tedious task. It'll take forever. So now we have both handles of this one done. A bit more. So that will get glued together. And this one will get glued together. Now, one of the things that I'm constantly asked is what's the best timber to use for different projects, and quite often I'm not quite sure how to answer it sometimes because I don't know what people's tastes are. I know what mine are. I know what Pamela's are because she keeps telling me all the time. But
not very subtle.
I value her opinion because other people's opinions generally can colour what you do, depending on availability of things. So that little box there, that little tray looks quite nice now. So we'll end the project stuff here. I've got to glue those together. When I glue them together, what I have to do is I have to round over that outside edge. I'll do that probably next week, and we'll put some things on the inside of it as well next week as well. But I don't know what we're going to do next week because that's pretty much the end of the tray sessions. So I might be able to organise a box maybe. We'll see how that goes. But anyway,
that'll be very experimental.
That'll be very experimental because I haven't made a box with that shape on it anyway.
Yeah.
But like I say, the timber that I use, when I'm choosing something, I listen to the people around me who have particular tastes in colours and types of timbers and things like that. It's not just about the colour of the timber and what it looks like. Sometimes it's the strength of the timber that counts, and what the piece is being used for. Now, these trays, as you can see, they're not very big. They probably don't hold a whole lot of things. You're not going to put a house brick in there and carry it around, or anything as heavy as a house brick in there. So the type of timber that you used is going to be more dependent on aesthetics. So if you look at some of the shapes, they also dictate which is the best colour to use. Now, I don't know what this shape would look like in New Guinea rosewood. Might have to give it a go, see what it looks like, but doesn't look too bad in that shape. So, you know, things like that. Now, the timbers that I use on the end of these trays is generally stuff that's of a medium density. It's where you grab hold of it every time. You need enough strength in here to be able to lift something. So you need those sorts of things again. But different timbers will give you a different visual effect because that's where it all ends up, and the visual effects. Now, Skip Flory asked a couple of months ago, or a couple of sessions ago, what timber I was using. Now, I didn't answer him on the show, but I will do it now. The box that I was doing, I'm not sure if it was this one or one of these. I think it was this one. Now, this one's got a couple of coats of finish on it. It's got some wax on it and all that sort of stuff. This one is a two timber session. It's heavy because it's the timber around the outside is number one, it's thick, and number two, it's all mahogany. This is Honduran mahogany is the framework, and then rose mahogany on the inside of the tray. Now, it's quite a heavy little box, basically because of the thicknesses of the timber. But I found the thickness of the timber really doesn't impact on these trays, because it's not as if they have to do any hard work. This one here is a little bit less, a bit lighter. It's Honduran mahogany and cedar. Now the cedar has taken a lot of the weight out because of the density of cedar. It's a very lightweight timber, so it's quite nice. Adding different types of timber again. This one here is camphor laurel, Honduran mahogany and cedar in the base. Again, taken the weight out of it by using a small thin piece of material in the bottom. So whatever timbers you use, think about what colours you like really, and what you want to match up. You know, like this, once it's got a coat of finish on it, I think I might have that for you next week anyway. It'll have a finish on it. You can see exactly what the tray will look like with silver ash, rose mahogany, the two timbers in that one. And you can see 7mm, 8mm, it's just very light timbers, very lightweight, and but visually it looks quite nice. So lots of different things, and then you start adding things like little platforms and things like that into the boxes. Again, this one here is European ash, Honduran mahogany and cedar. Oh no, that's New Guinea rosewood. Again, not very heavy, lightweight but strong. And then on top of that, of course, little platform to make it look a little bit more pretty, if that's what you like. So that's it for today. I hope you got something out of it. I hope the sound was good for you today and worked.
A bit mixed, I think.
A little bit mixed?
Mixed results.
Mixed results. Like I said, you probably need to turn your device bit down or up or whatever to get a good result. But anyway, we've got through the show, and if you turn your microphone off, you don't have to listen to me blare on. You could actually just follow the directions I've gone through in the process, and you could have got it done. So thanks for watching, everybody. Hopefully we'll have the sound fixed soon. We like I said, we're working on it. We'll get it sorted. So if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. We're not going to go away. We're just going to make it better, hopefully. And enjoy your woodwork for the next week. So have a good week, everybody, and I will see you all next Sunday. Don't know what we're going to be doing, but we'll see.
Experimental.
Yeah.